Hi, my name is Melanie Callaghan, and for my Facilitating Learning with Emerging Technologies in Blended and Online Environments final project, I wanted to be able to teach touchpoint math. Now, touchpoint math has been around for quite some time. However, I only learned about it and how to correctly teach it about 3 months ago, and I'm finding it makes a huge difference. My prime example is I have a first grade student who has autism, and I started 1 through 5 with him about a month ago, and now he is correlating touchpoint math with using his fingers as well, which is a skill he did not have before. So I'm really happy with touchpoint, so I hope this can help somebody else. So, like I said, my audience is 5 to 7 year old students who are on the autism spectrum. Can be used with general education students as well, 100%, but for my project, it is 5 to 7 year olds. Based on Bloom's digital taxonomy, my learning outcomes from my final project, the overall outcomes are my students will be able to learn how to use touch math effectively. The students will use technology within the classroom effectively. The student will understand how to add numbers 1 through 10, and the students will be able to apply these skills to real life situations, which I touch on more at the end. So, where I am implementing this project, while I'm implementing this project, I intended for this to be done during online learning while they're at home or on each student's individual device on their desk. So, most of my students have communication devices, so it's a tablet or an iPad. So if you come out of the Proloquo or another communication device, we can open this app, whether it be in um, boom cards, or this is a PowerPoint, and then everything will take place within Google Classroom, which all of my students have available to them at all times throughout the day. That way, someone's always there to help them if they're needed, but I want my students to be able to do this independently. So, what is touch math? A math concept easier and more acceptable for students with different learning styles or learning difficulties. Pre-K through grade school children will understand basic counting. Touch maths are only used numbers 1 through 9. So, some of the information that I wanted to talk about was our classroom uses Google Classroom, and this assignment will be linked in the classroom. So my students know how to open Google Classroom and find their assignments. So it's going to be easy to find and very user friendly because my students are very young. This assignment will be interactive within Google Classroom. The instructor will be able to see what the students are up to and how well they're doing with each assignment. The model I'm using is I do, we do, and you do. That way the students are seeing it firsthand as I'm doing it. Then they can ask questions and we can do it together. And then they're overall evaluated at the end of the assignment. My students need a lot of support using technology as well as learning the material. So on Google Classroom, they will be only assigned this assignment. So it would be the only one there and present for them to find. Then this is to be done both online learning as well as in person, like I stated before. So Janet Bullock and 3 other fellow teachers came up with Touchpoint system about 33 years ago. So I've been a teacher for about 4 years now, and I had not heard of this until I got to my current school. So this is new to me as well. So within the readings, I just wanted to touch on how my project goes with the readings that we talked about. So the 5 perspectives of teaching are transmission, apprenticeship, developmental nurturing, and social reform. The group of students I am targeting are in a behavior clinic setting. So we're working on their specific IEP goals throughout the day and a behavior plan. That way we can get them back into a district setting, which leads to seeking a better society, which is the last one, social reform. So we're trying to teach them, and then they can apply it in their real life situation. So this is just simple addition 1 through 10, but eventually it will grow and turn into more, so they just needed that basic foundation. This project is transmitting different material to each student. We model it in different ways so we can provide each student with success. I'm sorry. We're providing them with different ways to think for themselves. So, touch math might work for some students and might not work for other students. And as time goes on, we'll be able to see that it's not working for each student, and we'll be able to give them a different concept to work with while learning how to do simple addition. In discussion 2, we talked about a blended environment and the coursework in blended course design workbook by Catherine Linder. She speaks about blended learning environments and how they share a lot of similarities with traditional classrooms in terms of design, which is what we're trying to do here. We're in Google Classroom. I know the students are at home, but that's just something we need to deal with because no one was prepared for online learning the way that we had to last year. So I am attempting to prepare my students to learn more autonomously and independently, which is not something I would jump to right away if they were in the classroom. Ultimately, that is the goal, but right now we are trying to do so much more while they're at home because I can't be right next to them to do this work. Touch math starts with basic counting, and once they master this, students will be able to move into other concepts like money, having an allowance system, where they're earning money, they're earning for a specific item, and a bunch of other skills needed to succeed. So once they know how to count the basics, they can move on to pennies and nickels and dimes, which is ultimately where they need to be in real life situations so they can be independent. So how does it work? Touch math works by using your index finger, the finger next to your thumb, also known as your pointer finger, and you're going to read the number and count the dot by tapping it. This is how touch point got their name. So this would be, show me your pointer finger. So it's right here, your pointer finger. So let's start. So on each number, one circle is one tap, and if you see two circles, it's two taps. So one tap or 1, 2. So here's 1. So you're gonna tap. So here's 1. Here's 1, 2. Tap, tap. 3 and 4. 5 and 6. So 6 is where we see the double tap. So this red dot is 1. The green on the inside is 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then this goes up to 9. So we are getting to see all of them. The two tricky ones, I believe, are 7 and 9 because you're not just counting by twos. You do have that one dot that is just one tap compared to 2. So later on in the activity, I do give my students a verbal reminder, reminding them that this is tricky. So that's where this would practice together. Please drag the number of dots on the number you see. And this is where technology is going to play a huge role in my project. So I'm giving you the dots, and these will act as manipulatives ultimately. And I need you to drag the dots onto the number. And this is just to practice counting, which will ultimately lead us into addition. And then we'll go from there. So if you want to grab your counting squares or buttons at home or on your desk, you're more than welcome. That way you can do it in front of you as well on the screen. And that is making a modification for some of my students because some of my students do well with having it in their hand physically rather than just on technology. But if we're integrating both, we can teach the students how to have something in front of them and then also put it and apply it on the computer, which is really important. Generalizing it between both outcomes. So here's the number 3. So on Google Classroom, I would ask my students to drag 1, 2, 3. And I was able to put the dots down first, so then they go behind the dot on the number. That way my students are able to see that it matches up with my answer. So I did the same thing for 5. So I would ask my students to drag 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this is all about repetition. So the more they see it, the better they'll become with this concept of touch math. So ultimately, we want them to be able to see 2 plus 1 is 3 on flashcards. Touch math, 2 plus 1 is 3. 4 plus 2 is 6, and so on and so forth. And it just gonna become memorization until it's a concept that they fully understand. At first, I didn't believe that could work until I saw it happen with my students. So remember, one tap is 1, and 2 circles, there's 2 taps for 7 and 9. Like I stated before, having both of them on there is really important because I have the 1 tap and then 1, 2. So that was my verbal reminder. And if this was a real lesson, I would go through every number with my students just so they could see, and I would probably do the 2 taps quite a few times just so they would be able to see it. So another modification for my students, this works for online and blended environments because the instructor is always there to control the lesson. They can stop the student at any time and say, go back to this, or they can say, why don't you try this again? Or if I see that they're not getting numbers 1 through 5, I won't move them on to 6 to 9 just quite yet. So in discussion 4, we discussed how we can not just create these experiences for our students, but we have to support and provide different materials for each student. As educators, we support the students and we let them create their own experience, knowledge, and information. We help them break down the walls so we can find what works best for each specific student. So the modification I made here is I gave my students the dots on this number line so they can move it. But not only did I give them the dots, I only gave them the correct amount of dots for each problem. So there's 5 boxes for my number line. I only gave them 4 dots to move. And ultimately I forgot the word, I'm sorry. I would take this out over time. So next time I do this, I might give them the 5 dots so they have to think for themselves, but for right now I wanted to give them all the tools they need to succeed. That way they continue to succeed. And it gives them motivation and a sense of I can do this. And then over time I would transition it out. So I did it again. 4 2 plus 3 is 5. So I did give them all 5 dots here that they can move and then they can count. This would also probably be a worksheet that they had in front of them. So like I said before, if my students wanted to use the dots on their desk, they are more than welcome. So the student evaluation, this will be submitted by the teacher through Google Classroom, and this is the assignment for them to do. So I gave them 1 set of dots for the whole entire thing. So 2 plus 3 is 5, and they would write 5 in here through using their tablet or their laptop. So my overall outcomes, this being touch math, whether the student is dragging the dots or touching the dots, would depend on the type of technology that they have at home. While working on a computer, dragging the dots is sufficient, but if the student has a tablet or an iPad, they'll be able to touch the dots physically. They'll also have it in front of them with manipulatives. Dr. Simons stated that social system and technology are now part of our overall capacity. We depend on technology every single day, and this is how the education system is raising our children and educating them. Dragging the dots and touching the dots also helps students with their OT skills. OT is occupational therapy. Sometimes using a touchscreen or a mouse can be difficult for my students, so we are using this lesson for multiple outcomes. And the last overall outcome is that this is not a one-day lesson. This would be over the course of 1 to 2 weeks of practice and a lot of repetitiveness. Each step would be scaffolded in order to teach our overall outcome. So I really hope this helps somebody else teaching touch math. This was a great thing for me to learn over the last couple months at my new school, and I plan on implementing it other places. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.